Hey everyone. So the text that I am going to be looking at and how paratexts are related to it is the most recent text that we read, which is Neuromancer. And my perspective on it is how many cultural interpretations have been taken as far as Neuromancer is concerned. So my name is L.Hagerman. I am a sophomore English teacher at Benton Consolidated High School. I have been a sophomore English teacher for 4 years now and am now doing the whole distance learning thing because of COVID-19. So, learning a lot and excited to see what the future has in store. So, when I said that I'm doing a cross cultural analysis of the paratexts that are related to Neuromancer, what brought my attention or what caught my attention is that there are so many translations of this sci-fi text. When you're studying Shakespeare or a classic text, you are understandably, it's not surprising that a text would be interpreted or translated in many languages. But for a more recent science fiction text, it was really interesting for me that it's been interpreted in English, which was the original language, French, Japanese, Italian, German, Croatian, Dutch, Spanish, Russian, Portuguese, and Chinese. And so each of these published pieces have their own paratexts that sort of have a cultural significance to them. And we're going to look at three specific ones today. So the best place to start, in my opinion, is always the origin, which is the American publication in 1984. It was published by Ace Books in New York, and the cover art is by James Warhola. If Warhola sounds familiar, it's because he's related to the famous Andy Warhol. So James Warhola is formally trained. His famous influences are Norman Rockwell, which is he is said as inspiration, and then also his uncle, Andy Warhol. He has done many book covers. In fact, he's done, I think, 40 book covers over even some classic pieces. Uh, he is now doing fine art, much like Andy Warhol, and his style is surreal, vivid, and ironic. Very much like his uncle, except for where his uncle took very recognizable images, like the soup can or Marilyn Monroe. His nephew, James, he likes to take things that are a bit more not as classic or recognizable, and he has the more surreal vibe. So, this is a picture of him, and we're going to look at the cover that he did for Neuromancer. This is the original cover for Neuromancer from 1984. If you look, the green lines kind of give you the feeling of what cyberspace is supposed to look at. Remember, cyberspace, the term was coined in this particular text. And so these green parallel lines are very trying to give the reader an idea of what cyberspace looks like. Another thing that you can point out here for paratext is that you have a quote from a recognizable or previously established sci-fi critic talking about how William Gibson is awesome. Now, the reason that you have this on a first edition is because William Gibson, though he has written before now, perhaps isn't as well known. And so this is establishing his credibility, inviting readers to come and read the text. Now, if we take a little bit closer look at the illustration, this is really important as far as James Warhol is concerned. You can see this is very reflective, kind of a pop art. It's very vivid, bright, vibrant, but it also contains a little bit of irony and satire. So if you look at this, it kind of looks like the dark side of artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence, of course, is technology that is supposed to mimic or mime human intelligence. And so he's kind of made this anthropomorphic, human looking entity that isn't quite human. Now, he's embellished this with so much glamour and gemstones and wealth. which is sort of a critique or a satire of the consumerism that goes behind technology. And this creature does not look benevolent. This is a very ominous artificial intelligence humanoid. And the symmetry, I think, sort of indicates that there are two sides to this personality, which would, of course, indicate Wintermute and Neuromancer. Now, the next publication or the next paratext that I would like to discuss is the cover of the Japanese publication from 1986. So this is 2 years after the American release. So I'm going to butcher so many of these words, so apology in advance. But Neuromancer is the name of this text. It's published in 1986 by Hayakawa Shobo in Tokyo, and the cover art is by Okumura Yukimasa. Sorry. So Okumura Yukimasa was traditionally trained, and he was traditionally trained in the art of Shijo school. Shijo has an emphasis on detail and realism, in decorativeness, and it's also mixed with the Western formalized naturalism and the expression of the inner spirit of a thing. It has a playful humor to it. Um, he also did a lot of covers for Japanese rock music artists, and so he has kind of a rebellious sort of bad boy element to him. He's also one of the first Japanese artists to work in digital graphics. His style is a mixture of this shiju and the graphic twist. And again, I'm totally butchering these Japanese words, and my apologies in advance. Okay, this is the original cover for the Japanese 1986 publication of Neuromancer. What I find really interesting is the mixture of modern and traditional in this image. It's very reflective of Japanese culture. So first you see this background, and it's this pale blue. It's very soothing, and it almost looks like rice paper. And then the image is not a distinct image. It's actually an image made up of many elements, almost a reflection of the inner spirit, the artificial intelligence, the makeup of it. If you look at the image, it looks like it's absorbing external detail to make up identity, almost like artificial intelligence would. Artificial intelligence gathers situations and gathers evidence, and that becomes its identity, much like Wintermute and Neuromancer. You can see this is very detailed. It's graphic, but it's also clean, and it feels very symmetrical. It almost feels peaceful in a way. It's busy, and yet it's very peaceful. And so this is a close-up of the imagery. Again, it has a lot of graphic detail, and it's very, very clear that, this Kumura Yukimasa, that he put a lot of time and energy into making it perfect. Okay, the final piece that I want to discuss in depth is the German publication. It's a year after the Japanese publication in 1987, published by Hein Science Fiction and Fantasy in Munich. And the cover art is by Barclay Shaw. What's interesting about Barclay Shaw is he's actually not German. He's a freelance American sci-fi artist. Now, he, after between 1978 present, he has illustrated nearly 500 covers of science fiction and fantasy text, which means he is totally steeped in sci-fi and fantasy, which means that, he's a very clear candidate for a cover, which is why Germany hired him. He is Hugo nominated. He hasn't won any Hugo Awards, but he is nominated. And he's also a 3D consultant for the US Army and the Department of Defense, which is kind of crazy. His style is eclectic, surreal, and vivid. And you'll see with a lot of these artists of sci-fi cover art, surreal sort of seems to be what they are comfortable with. Same thing with vivid. They like bright colors, really strong imagery. So if you look at his German. This is the first time that his cover appears on a text is in um, this German this German publication. Um, you do see, as far as paratexts are concerned, that it will talk about the awards that have been won by this particular text. You wouldn't have seen that in the 1984 edition, obviously, because it had just come out, and so it hadn't had enough time to win awards. But now we do see that it is established not just by who the author is, but what he has done. You give a closer look at the imagery, you do see that this is very vivid. It is very eclectic. It's extremely bright. It has those 1980s neons that you hear from in the book, but also that are really, really popular in the culture at the time, both in America and Germany. You see it has both Japanese and American influences that are present in the Chiba city. Um, you see that it's in American and Japanese. The American you see is Budweiser. So it's like, I mean, you can't get more Americana in the 1980s and really maybe today other than Budweiser. You also see the two characters. You see Molly and Case and the recognizable nails on Molly and the technology associated with Case. Again, 1980s hair, right? And then a really clear depiction of both the poverty and the crime of this particular part of Japan, of Chiba City. Now, the surreal element comes in, I believe, with this pipe here. Now, this pipe is technology, right? It's human, it's created, and yet it seems very organic. It has a very surreal element to it, sort of this weird out of the box thing. So this is the Barclay Shaw interpretation of the book. You'll see that it is probably of the three the most literal because it has clear, recognizable imagery, but he does incorporate some abstract pieces when it comes to this drugstore. On the inside of this drugstore, you don't see aisles of drugs and items that you can purchase. It actually seems like an entrance into the Matrix. So, kind of a fun, interesting look at this text. Now, if you look, there are some other, this is the French paratext, the French cover. The Russians in the 90s used the exact same as the Germans. And then this is the Spanish version. And if you look out there, there are lots of different ones. There's one from the just a few years ago from Portuguese. It's really interesting. But what I find very cool about this text in particular is that it has inspired so many interpretations of what it is fundamentally. You can see from each culture, they have a totally different idea of what is contained within the covers. And so if you were to go shopping for a book and you only look at the cover, you're not going to think that these three covers reflect the exact same text. And that's what's pretty cool about Neuromancer is that what's inside is open to a lot of interpretation. And so the illustrators of the paratext that have gone alongside the French, Russian, Spanish, Portuguese, the Croatian one is weird. You can look that up if you want to. I didn't feel okay with putting it in this PowerPoint. It was kind of very, very sexual. And then, just so many different interpretations that are over one. So I just want to say thanks. I hope that you enjoyed this presentation or at least found it somewhat informative. If you have any questions, please post them to this post. Here is my works cited, and I hope you have a good day.